Hello and welcome to the House of Wellness. I'm Luke Darcy, and it is always a great pleasure to be here with the whole team. Welcome to Joe Stanley. Hello, Jacqui, Felgate, and Dr. Nick Carr. Good to be with you guys.
Good to see you, Darcy.
It is so lovely to be here. And can you believe it's already April? Honestly, it's happened very quickly. But as with most things, the names of the months of the year all have a meaning. And April, I've done a bit of research for you. April comes from the Latin word apparire. Do you like that?
I did.
Yes.
Well done.
Apparire, it means open, which refers to blossoming spring flowers, which is so lovely. Of course, not relevant to us because we are well and truly transitioning into autumn. But...
Well, there you go. You always have these really interesting facts, don't you?
I try.
I can also tell you that April is World Autism Month and that 75 million people right around the world are on the spectrum.
Which is around about 1% of the global population. And here in Australia, it's about 1 in 110. And it particularly affects how you interact with other people and the environment. But it affects everyone differently, which is why it's called a spectrum.
And Nick, I love the fact that we celebrate neurodiversity now. We understand that all of us are neurodiverse in some way. And as you said, it is a spectrum that we're all on it at some level. Changing gear, how good is it again to be in the outdoors, beautiful bit of sun, soaking in some nature? I love it.
It's absolutely beautiful. And have you noticed how many dragonflies are around these days?
Yes,
I'm always about the butterflies usually, but dragonflies are everywhere.
But, Joe, it's actually recently come out that certain animals, including these bugs that are flying around us now, perceive time differently from the way we humans do.
Well, I guess that does give new meaning to the term time flies, doesn't it?
It sure does, because scientists looked at 138 different species, and what they looked at was what's called their temporal perception, which means the rate at which they perceive changes in the world. And what they found is that animals that are living a fast-paced lifestyle, the little ones or the ones that fly, or both, actually perceive time the fastest.
And dragonflies came in at number 1. They perceive changes 300 times in 1 second. It's amazing.
Which actually compares with us humans who can only manage a miserable 65 changes every second.
Well, do you know the value in that, for me, is understanding, of course, difference and diversity is across all of nature and in humans and bugs, and let's embrace that.
And it just goes to show how much we still have to understand about the brain and nature and how much we have left to discover.
And I think, Nick, we've all got an understanding now that taking care of our brain is a good thing, particularly as we age. And the great news is there are a whole range of options to keep the grey matter in tip-top shape.
So when we think about the brain, we rarely think of it as a muscle. We always think about ourselves in the brain and all of these problems we have and all of these issues. But no, the new evidence and science is showing us that we actually understand the brain for the first time in a completely new way. The biggest change that's happened in the last 10 years is that we can actually see inside the living brain for the first time in 7,000 years of history. We can sequence every cell in the brain and our body and every species, so we know where we've come from. And the biggest breakthrough in terms of longevity, joyfulness, happiness, is understanding the brain's really plastic, and that's the concept of neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to become healthy, strong and happy across your lifespan by certain practices that can really drive that. So this is my favourite thing to talk about, some tips for brain health and fitness. And the first thing to do to make it really simple is as soon as you wake up in the morning, I want you to just take your eyes and look out the window and take a panoramic view, rather than going straight to your phone or some narrow view, because what you're doing is you're actually using your physiology for your favour. So you're immediately turning down your stress system just by opening your eyes wide into the open world, compared to taking a narrow view, which activates your stress system. We actually understand that now. We understand that's a direct link between the way your eyes work and your nervous system that causes stress. So it's such a simple thing to do, not easy to do because we're in our habits, but it's the number one thing that can really drive neuroplasticity and a big change in your life, because you're actually starting to then get your brain to then go and look for all the evidence to show you all the good things happening in life. Whereas you do the opposite, you're setting up your brain because it likes stress more than happiness and pleasure at 10 times the rate. It's just designed that way to keep us alive. And so then for the rest of the day, your brain will always be looking for threats. It is simple, but why is it hard to do? So why aren't we doing this in the world? Why aren't we happy, healthy and strong? Why is there an escalation in an acceleration of mental health problems or people being stressed or busy and all of these things in an amazingly abundant world? Why? It's because of the way the brain's built and no one's being taught how to train their brain like a muscle. But the hard part is doing it every day because things are happening in your life, right? Stress isn't going away in life. It's really real. And so because of the way stress goes into the brain, it keeps us stuck. We go straight back to the things we learnt over a lifetime and your parents learnt over their lifetimes. Our brain is not born a blank slate. We come predetermined by our genetics, and then the way our experiences shape our early life has a big impact on our belief system. So you can see why, yes, it's simple, but to step into this new cocktail of neuroplasticity where you're changing your future that's different to your ancestors can't happen easily, can it? Because you're literally shifting into a whole new mindset and life. So no wonder people are stuck. And people like to put it on the individual and say, if only they did this, if only they had more willpower. But when you understand how the brain works, that's just not possible because you have to train the brain first to make it possible for people. It's the first step.
It's so true. Living in the moment is so important. It's actually my daily practice, and I would say it is one of the keys to happiness and health.
And I think connection as well, especially as we age, we really have to keep interacting with other people.
And Nick, this is one of your great passions, I know. Staying socially active is good for brain health. What else do you do to keep the brain healthy and active?
Yeah, well, one of the most important things is to keep the mind and the body fit and moving. That's really great for memory, but so is music. Now, music, listening to familiar tunes, really helps stimulate and restore the ageing brain. I mean, how often have you seen someone who suffers from dementia really come alive when they hear a familiar tune?
And it happens to us on a daily basis. You hear a song. I've got the Sheryl Crow song in my mind at the moment. It reminds me of being in the US when I was 19 or 20. It was #1. It does take you back to a specific moment, and that makes sense. That's good for brain health too.
And this is also occurring at the gorgeous St Paul's Cathedral in Melbourne. It's where those two great memory boosters, exercise and music, are combining.
Take me to
Every Wednesday evening and Sunday morning in Melbourne, an eclectic mix of volunteers meet at St Paul's Cathedral and hike their way up a steep spiral staircase.
I think there's about 53 steps. I haven't counted them in a long time. Depending on your age, you're probably puffing in, for that extra breath. And now, the stimulus starts.
Bell ringing to me is the ultimate team sport. We're a team, and that's what I love, because there's very few things that involved so much physical skills and mental gymnastics.
It might sound strange to call bell ringing a sport, but spend a few minutes in the ringing chamber and you'll understand.
There's definitely a workout involved. It requires good hand-eye coordination.
If you're ringing heavier bells at the back, you need some stamina and also strength.
As you get older and your joints get a bit dry, or whatever they do, it's a very good exercise.
With the bells at St Paul's weighing up to 1,500 kilograms, ringing them isn't nearly as simple as just pulling on a rope. Throughout this hobby's long history, ringers who don't use the right technique have suffered muscle tears, rope burns and even broken bones from getting caught in the ropes and hoisted to the ceiling.
Go again! The challenge in the beginning is to handle a bell properly, right? You don't injure yourself, you don't break the bell.
Definitely the handling lessons are quite difficult at the beginning because you have to get the technique right.
It's like just giving the right amount of push at the right time and the right amount of resistance at the right time. If you push too hard, you've got so much more resistance to fight against, and that's what uses up your energy.
But bell ringing isn't just physically demanding. Once you've mastered the technique, the next hurdle is ringing your bell in sequence with your teammates by following a complex set of rules called a method.
You've got to think in mathematical sequences, and that's great mental exercise. Like keyboard instruments or anything else that requires mental and physical coordination is good for you. Sometimes peals are rung. A peal is a marathon in bell ringing. Goes for typically 3 hours or so. It's a long time. And a lot of ringers claim in that, at a certain point, you almost go into a semi-automatic state.
I think at the end of a session, there's the adrenaline racing or running around your body. So you feel quite chuffed, right? But I think you feel it the next morning. You know, you've had a good night rest, but the next morning you feel a bit exhausted.
Well, you learn something new every day. Who would have thought that bell ringing was, one, so popular, and two, such a great workout?
Something for everyone in the House of Wellness,
right.
Jack. I always appreciate that. And we're also finding that technology can do more and more of the thinking for us. Road safety experts have predicted that advanced safety technology in cars is going to reduce our national road toll by up to a third. I'm convinced that in our lifetime, driverless cars are just going to be commonplace.
Oh, look, it's amazing to think about all of the gadgets and driver assists that are out there. I mean, how did we ever get by without rear cameras for reversing and keeping everyone safe around us?
I always remember trying to learn to drive with the hand over the shoulder. Yeah. Anyway, yes, nowadays we've got things like lane assist and autonomous emergency braking, and they help save thousands of lives every single year.
Well, anything that reduces the number of deaths on the road has to be a good thing. Because last year, Australia's road toll reached a 5-year high of almost 1,200 people. So really not good news.
Still feels like an avoidable tragedy, that one, Nick. Today's all about boosting our brains and our minds. And up next, we're going to have a look at the condition Bruce Willis has put on the map.
Plus, Hines enters a magical coastal cave for a spot of sensory stimulation. That's next.
Dr. Nick, April is World Autism Month, but it's also Parkinson's Awareness Month. It's a really complicated condition. Can you give us some clarity about the early signs to look for?
Yeah, well, you're right, Jack, because people often associate Parkinson's with things like the shaking of the hands, trouble walking, both of which are right. But it often starts up with something a bit more subtle, a change in the sense of smell or the handwriting getting smaller. In fact, I had a patient who was alerted to his early Parkinson's because a friend said to him, "Why are you walking like a robot?"
Wow, it's amazing, isn't it? And Parkinson's is a brain condition. And recently in the news, we've been looking at Bruce Willis and a condition that he suffers from, which is also a brain condition.
Yeah, it's called aphasia, and it's a disorder with difficulties in expressing and understanding written and spoken language. It's caused by damage to a part of the brain, usually by something like a stroke, but it can also be due to dementia. And it really horribly affects someone's capacity to communicate.
Which we obviously all need to do, but particularly when you're an actor like Bruce Willis. But 140,000 Australians suffer from the condition, and we spoke to just a few of them.
In 2009, former kindergarten teacher Anne Cole suffered a stroke. At the time, she completely lost the ability to speak.
Well, it was awful. There was nothing there. I can speak, but nothing there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Anne is saying that the words that came out weren't really words.
No, it's awful.
And then she could say yes and no. They were the first words, but it didn't mean that yes was yes and no was no.
Anne and her husband Barry soon learnt that this loss of speech has a name.
Aphasia is a disorder of language. It's caused by damage to the language networks in the brain. So by language, it can mean any aspect of understanding, talking, reading, writing, and also other things like using numbers.
Epworth Healthcare speech pathologist Lauren Fletcher specialises in treating patients who have received an aphasia diagnosis.
So aphasia is actually quite common. The current estimate is that about 140,000 people are living with aphasia in Australia at the moment. But up until pretty recently, not many people had heard about it. So recently we had the news and the media attention around Bruce Willis saying that he has aphasia, and that's something that's really brought it to light and brought it to the consciousness of the general public.
Victorian Catherine Rampant acquired aphasia after having a stroke at just 30 years old.
It was really traumatic, and it was luckily I had mum and dad that came in, not to comfort me, but to support me and to can communicate because they can understand a lot without words. Bronte nodded, but then she peered at Bingley.
Catherine's eyes were incredible. Her face, we could pick up so much. You really didn't expect that you would be able to, but we could get a lot. But you missed out on emotional talking and things like that. It was more sort of needs. She could get across what she needed and if something was wrong, but you couldn't sort of talk in depth.
There is no cure for aphasia, so there's no magic bullet or tablet or anything that's going to fix it immediately. But the aim of speech pathology intervention is to sort of restore or recover lost function, so working on ways to re-establish sort of new neural pathways.
Speech therapy's helped a lot. At first, when I couldn't talk at all, they helped me out a lot. They helped me to sound my words and to do many worksheets. Do you want salad or vegetables? Salad. It's a lot easier for me now. But if any situations happen or anything, even if I'm tired or stressed, I have a lot of trouble. You have to really work hard to pronounce words and
find words sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll come with the first letter of a word, won't you?
Yeah.
I like speak, but slowly, and then when I go to speak, give it your time.
The best thing to do if you're unsure about how to communicate with someone with aphasia is really to ask them or ask someone who's close to them, what works best for them.
I've got camera.
She finds it really difficult when more than one person speaks at the same time, or there's music in the background. That's been difficult for her. And the other one that I would add is that people finishing sentences for her or assuming this is what she's going to say. And I've been guilty of it, and she doesn't take prisoners lightly, I can tell you.
Now I've got cran from the clock.
Oh, right. A person who has aphasia, their cognitive ability is not affected at all. So their level of intelligence is just the same. The speed of the brain working one way or another is slower. But, in our family, the ideas person is Anne. So if we have something coming up, Anne will put forward the ideas and then I'll implement them. That's how it works.
Oh, dear.
We have to work together a lot.
Yes.
And it's really important for someone with aphasia to have that support behind them, and that's the way I view it. The two of us working together has been really important in her continued recovery. Right?
Yep.
Dr. Nick, it's interesting, but it's also very sad, isn't it, to hear that people get impatient with people with aphasia and they finish their sentences for them, which must be so frustrating. But Bruce Willis's condition actually led to his dementia. Is that correct?
Well, the short answer, Jacqui, is no. He was really unfortunate to get this rare form of frontotemporal dementia, which is associated also with speech difficulties, aphasia.
We now know that staying active and socially connected is a really big help, and also a healthy diet.
Well, yes, and there's a B group vitamin called folic acid, which is found in the leafy greens, all those yummy vegetables.
Yes.
And it's really important. It's been found that low levels of folate in older people is associated with a high risk of dementia and even death. So there are now calls for us to be measuring folate in our older population.
Well, we all know how Hinesy is obsessed with healthy living and his diet, so he's off to a hot spring with a twist.
If you've ever treated yourself to a hot spring session, then you'll be familiar with the benefits of mineral bathing. Better sleep, reduced pain, and some people even reckon it helps their mental health. So what happens when you combine a hot spring with a splash of colour, a cave and a dip in some cold water? Let's find out. Rebecca, the only thing I remember about going to the hot springs in the past is that it's very relaxing, but I don't know too much more about it. What are geothermal waters?
So geothermal waters, it stands for geo's earth and thermal is the heat, and that comes from the core of the earth, and it brings up all the beautiful minerals from the soil and sand to create some unique healing mineral water.
I've got to ask, how far do they have to travel to get up here?
Well, we have a bore on our property and it's 850 metres and comes up at around 42 degrees.
A lot of people associate hot springs with health benefits, and that's because of the nutrients in the water. Can you run me through some of the different minerals that are in the water and the health benefits of actually sitting in it?
Yeah, so there's lots of different benefits. We have magnesium, which we know is great for our bones. There's silica in the water, which is really good for your skin. There's a range of different minerals that as you soak, your pores accept them through into your body.
I want to know how the cold pools work in that they actually help elevate the overall experience.
Absolutely. We have 2 cold plunge pools, and going from hot and cold is really good for your bones and your muscles. Also really, really good for the mind. It's quite invigorating once you're able to go into that cold plunge pool. You tingle all over, you feel endorphins get released and you feel absolutely amazing.
How cold are we talking, Rebecca?
14 degrees.
Okay, so I know that this is supposed to be good for you, but going from that to this is a massive shock. I'm just going to think of the benefits,
One thing I'm really excited to get into tonight is actually the sensory cave. Tell me how it works and what do the different colours do?
So we've got colour and sound therapy in our caves, and colour therapy it's different for the individual. So it affects their mood, their nervous system, depending on what colour you choose. So it's quite amazing to lay back in the caves with the colour therapy and the sound as well.
There's a technique people use called earthing. It's where, to feel more grounded, you wear bare feet out and about to connect with Mother Nature. Now, I would say soaking in a hot spring is the water equivalent of that. Now, I've been in hot springs before, but not until I've really focused on where that water's coming from and the health benefits in it that I felt so refreshed and rejuvenated after it. Now, I get it. This isn't practical for everybody in everyday life, but it's about picking elements of it that I loved. Maybe some lower lights, some salts in a bath, or simply being off my phone and disconnecting with the stress and reconnecting with nature. But what I can say is I'm going to take this feeling with me and try to replicate it.
We all have facial hair, and although there's nothing wrong with that, there's also nothing wrong with wanting to get rid of that. There are many pros. Having a clean canvas helps with skincare absorption and also with makeup application. But before you reach for that nasty razor, I have a far more stylish and gentle way. Finishing Touch Flawless Face is a revolutionary device that erases hair quickly and painlessly, without the irritation that comes with plucking, waxing or shaving. Its sleek design is subtle and discreet and really looks like a lipstick. There's technology at play, including a double ring for even quicker hair removal and an inbuilt light to pick up even the finest of hairs. So if you're like me and you're obsessed with that perfect manicured eyebrow, the Finishing Touch Flawless Brows device is perfect for in between those brow appointments. Designed for maintenance and precision, hold it like a pencil, but use it like a hair eraser. I always like to apply it to the centre of the brow where you can get a few unwanted hairs, or near the hairline where the brow can often go a little crazy. If you're struggling this Mother's Day, give the gift of looking flawless with a range that is dedicated to just that. Is Milana and Valentina watching this at all? This is going live before Mother's Day, right?
Certainly feel grateful living in a country like Australia where people who live with chronic illnesses get a lot of support. But, Joe, on the flip side, it seems there is an enormous amount of misinformation around some of those chronic diseases.
Yeah, absolutely. More than 2 million Australians live with diagnosed diabetes, with most of them claiming that they have been shamed and blamed for it, and a whopping 80% say that they have experienced stigma and discrimination.
And that ranges from people assuming that people with diabetes can only do certain things, also discrimination in the workplace, and many even being blamed for causing the condition themselves.
Yeah, and that last point, Jack, refers particularly to sugar. Now, sugar alone does not cause type 2 diabetes, whereas type 1 is actually an autoimmune disease that's not triggered by lifestyle or diet.
So, Nick, diabetes advocacy groups are pushing for much more awareness in this space. What's your advice?
Well, here's a number one tip. Don't stare at someone when they're injecting their insulin, all right? Give them the space. And don't offer gratuitous advice, as, ooh, you know, should you be eating that? Or, my dad got diabetes and had to have his leg amputated. These things are not helpful. So either ask sensible questions, or if you're not sure, shut up.
That is great advice for anyone living with chronic illness, including the disease that has a major impact on the brain and affects millions of people worldwide, MS.
Multiple sclerosis, or MS, is a disease that affects the brain and spinal cord, which make up our central nervous system that controls everything we do, from physical movement to thought processes and decision-making. Myelin is the coating on our nerves that protects them and helps them send messages quickly between the brain and the rest of the body. In MS, our immune system attacks myelin by mistake, treating it like an infection. When myelin is damaged, the messages travelling along the nerve become distorted, or they don't get through at all. This interruption of communication signals causes unpredictable symptoms, such as numbness, tingling, mood changes, memory problems, pain, fatigue, vision disturbances, or coordination issues. While the exact cause is unknown, more than 3 million people worldwide have MS, with over 33,000 cases in Australia alone. It impacts more women than men, and its symptoms are often invisible and varied, making it extremely difficult for people to understand what people with MS might be experiencing. Some of the more common symptoms may include issues with balance and mobility, sensory symptoms leaving you in excruciating pain, as if your body is on fire or your skin is crawling. Brain fog, where you feel like your head is full of cement and you can't seem to find the right words. And fatigue, resulting in debilitating tiredness, even after a full night's sleep, exacerbating other MS symptoms. There are two main forms of MS. The first is relapsing MS, where people usually have times of stability in between flare-ups or relapses. After a relapse, symptoms, which may last for days or even weeks, may ease or go away completely. Growing evidence suggests that early and ongoing treatment with disease-modifying therapies can help manage symptoms, slow the damage, and help reduce relapsing MS attacks. The second is progressive MS, where people experience gradual and ongoing loss of function without distinct attacks. Options are still limited for slowing down or stopping progressive MS, which is why MS Australia's mission is so important. For over 50 years, MS Australia has led the world in groundbreaking research to help improve the lives of people with MS. Australian research is bringing us ever closer to treatments that will slow or stop disability progression for everyone. So if you're living with MS or know someone who is, you're not alone. MS Australia. Our mission is a world without MS.
MS, or multiple sclerosis, is a lifelong condition, but it's rarely fatal. And most people with MS actually have a near normal life expectancy. But it does require some life adjustments and some understanding by those in the community.
Well, actually, American actors Selma Blair and Christina Applegate have both been diagnosed with MS.
And that news raised awareness and interest amongst the public, very similar to what Michael J. Fox did for Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, very high profile, Michael J. Fox's battle with that. Hey, coming up, Dr. Nick, is it true that we can train our brain to the extent where you can turn a left-hander into a right-hander?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, Darcy. I'll be showing you in a minute how you can take the left hand and turn it into the right.
And should it be illegal to smack your children? That's coming up after this.
Getting to that time of year where everyone in the family is walking through the door with an unwanted visitor. Of course, I'm talking about a sore throat. Why do we see so many sore throats at this time of year?
During the cooler months, when we find ourselves in closer proximity with each other, may increase the spread of germs from person to person, and that can mean lots of painful sore throats.
Young or old, a sore throat doesn't discriminate, but what can cause it?
The bacterial species known as Streptococcus is one of the most common causes of throat infections. The build-up of this bacteria in the throat can cause pain and irritation, making it difficult to swallow.
A lot of bacteria can be inhaled via the nose or the mouth. Is that why the throat is so susceptible to infection?
The throat is an important part of our immune system, as it helps to stop the germs that enter our body through our mouth and nose. Unwanted bacteria can spread through droplets in the air when somebody sneezes, and it's our throat that may get the infection first.
Treating a sore throat can also help stop the spread of bacteria to family and friends, so what treatments are out there?
Sore throats can be very painful and can worsen if left untreated. Using an antibacterial throat gargle and an anaesthetic lozenge may kill the bacteria and relieve the symptoms of a painful sore throat quickly and effectively.
Betadine ready-to-use antibacterial sore throat gargle is a fast, convenient solution when a sore throat strikes. Used with betadine anaesthetic lozenges, it can offer a treat and relieve combination for your painful sore throat.
Hey, Joe, I want to ask you this. How do you go with Willow and taking medicine? It can be a really stressful thing, the child Willow's age, trying to get them to swallow a capsule.
Well, she's 14 and she's only just starting to get her head around the mini caps, but there's been fear for her around taking medicine.
Do you remember the old school parenting where, I think it's a lot better these days, but the threat of a wooden spoon if you couldn't do it,
my
or
gosh.
maybe even a smack if you couldn't actually do something that was quite stressful.
Oh, absolutely. We grew up in the 80s. Like, we are a generation where it's the wooden spoon, the thong, you know, the belt. I mean, people were very ingenious around that kind of thing back then, weren't they?
And we can sort of laugh about it. I caught the tail end of the old school Christian brothers, and they were pretty fond of a bit of corporal punishment, which has been outlawed now in 63 countries, including Australia and New Zealand. And Australia, in schools, we're no longer allowed to reprimand our kids in that way, which I think is probably a healthier and smarter way to go about it, Joe.
Well, actually, a coalition of parents and researchers are now calling for smacking to be outlawed outright, following research that has demonstrated that kids who are repeatedly smacked actually are twice as likely to experience anxiety and depression in later years.
Yeah, and that, you know, is a disturbing stat. And when you look back, it probably makes a little bit of sense. Someone who would never raise a hand is our very gentle GP, Dr. Nick Carr, and he's going to talk about that left may actually be right.
This is a story about a bloke I'm going to call Jake because, well, that's his name. Now, I first met Jake back in 1988 when I came to Australia. And back then, even though I say it myself, I was a reasonable squash player. So when they said, I should have a game with Jake, he's pretty good, I said, yes. Now, I was a bit surprised when I turned up at the squash court and Jake only had one arm. What happened, I asked. Got chopped off in a motorboat propeller, said Jake. Oh, I said, just as well it wasn't your good arm. It was, said Jake. Oh, I thought I'm playing a one-armed squash player playing with his wrong arm. This is going to be hopeless. Well, what happened next? Perhaps you can guess. Jake beat me easily. I learned a lot that day. I mean, I was always really right-hand dominant, so the idea of using my left hand for everything absolutely appalled me. But Jake had been in the same situation, and yet he had retrained his non-dominant arm to do everything as well or better than his now missing right arm used to. Now, Jake didn't have a choice, but I did. So I started with some small things. I tried brushing my teeth with my left hand. At first it was a disaster. The toothbrush spent more time up my nose than it did actually cleaning my teeth, but I got better. When I got my first computer with a mouse, I popped it on the left-hand side. And I started doing little things like carrying bags or trying to shave with my left hand. Why? Well, because if Jake could do it with his one remaining arm, why not train myself to have two equally good ones? And besides, it's good for the brain to be made uncomfortable. Making the old grey matter learn new tricks helps keep it active and may actually reduce the chance of that most feared of diseases, dementia. These days, I routinely swap hands when I'm brushing my teeth, and I only ever mouse with the left. Many years ago, I ditched squash for tennis, and I sometimes have a game with my left hand. I'm still pretty hopeless, but at least I can hit the ball. And I can almost feel my brain groaning with the effort. And if I ever have the bad luck that Jake had and come off the worst in an encounter with a motorboat propeller, well, I'll be prepared.
Keeping healthy and well typically involves food as your main source of nutrients, except for one, vitamin D. Often referred to as the sunshine vitamin, it's produced within the skin when it's exposed to sun. It's no surprise that vitamin D is one of the most common nutrient deficiencies worldwide, particularly for those who live in places where sunlight is limited in winter or they're inside a lot. In fact, more than 1 in 3 Australian adults have mild to severe vitamin D deficiency. As essential as it is elusive, vitamin D helps to maintain healthy bones and teeth, support muscle health and assist immune function. The body also needs vitamin D to help absorb another key nutrient, calcium. Without it, the body takes calcium from its stores within the skeleton, which weakens bones and prevents the formation of strong new bones. Unfortunately, few foods contain vitamin D naturally, but it can be found in small amounts in fatty fish, cheese and egg yolk. Supplementation is also an option. Look for vitamin D supplements containing calciferol, the active form of vitamin D3, faster at increasing vitamin D levels in the body than cholecalciferol, the most common form of vitamin D3 in supplements. We're not exactly short of sunshine in Australia, but it's always better to be safe. I've got a twist on the old saying, slip, slop, slap, seek, slide, and for vitamin D, supplement.
Zoe there helping us get our vitamin D even as we head into autumn. Now, Jack, I know in recent times it's been all about embracing plant-based foods, but I got to tell you, I really do love my steak.
I don't mind a steak either, occasionally though. But it was interesting. A recent study into climate change found that many Australians have absolutely no desire at all to reduce their meat intake.
That's right. It was a study out of Monash University and it found that 40% of Australians have no intention of reducing their meat intake, even though they worry about climate change.
Yes, and it also found that 26% of those surveys actually did want to reduce their meat intake, but they just hadn't gotten around to it yet.
Well, there's absolutely no denying that plant-based foods are much better for the environment, even though I really do love my steak. What can I do? It's also true that a plant-based diet is much better for your brain. So here's Hines and Zoe with some brain-boosting superfoods to go nuts for.
We are nuts about nuts around here, Zoe, and rightly so. They're a delicious snack, but you can also incorporate them into a main meal.
And there's a reason why the saying health nut exists. They're just so nutrient-dense. And we're using 2 of the best. I'm using almonds as the hero of my salad. And, well, what's going on here?
You can say it, I have gone nutty with my granola, but there is one I want to focus on in particular, and that is the walnut. There is research to suggest that it may help in the sleep space.
And that's because, like almonds, they're one of the best natural food sources of melatonin. This hormone helps to regulate your internal clock and prepares you for sleep.
And like our approach to all health, food is just one part of the picture when it comes to chasing extra Z's. We can also turn to the herbal world.
And of course, one of these plant powers is ashwagandha. This Ayurvedic herb has a compound that supports better sleep quality. Bring on the sleepiness.
The tall grassland plant valerian may also help us get some extra shut-eye. Traditionally used in Western herbal medicine, it relieves restlessness, helps mind relaxation and calms the nervous system.
And finally, one we all know and love, lavender oil, which relieves sleeplessness and I must admit, I think smells divine.
Yes, but to get the best benefits internally, these herbs can also be found in supplement form.
All this talk about sleep is making me want to have a nap.
Hold up, before you go, I've got to ask you, what do you think squirrels watch on TV?
I don't know.
Netflix?
Oh, wow, that's...
Good, huh?
No.
I feel like I missed my calling, like full comedian.
Oh.
Get Nourished is brought to you by Go Healthy's Pro Ashwagandha Sleep, a convenient one-a-day formulation to help induce sleep.
Well, today's been a lot about our brains, how we can look after them better, use them better, but I feel like, Nick, we're only just scratching the surface on that one.
You're right, Darcy, because there's so much more that we need to know. One thing we do know for certain is that keeping really physically fit is great for the mind. I may actually have mentioned that once or twice before. But a study during COVID lockdowns showed that being part of an active sporting community is great for building resilience and improving stress and academic performance.
All the more reason to get out there and join your local sporting club. And if you're a woman, maybe get into some world-class soccer.
That's right, because it's less than 100 days until Australia and New Zealand host the FIFA Women's World Cup. It all kicks off from July right here. It's going to be a sporting extravaganza, isn't it?
Well, Jack, it's going to be the biggest sporting event in Australia since the Sydney Olympics in 2000. I cannot wait for it. It's going to be fantastic. That's all we've got time for today.
Make sure you check out myself and Gerald Quickly on House of Wellness Radio every Sunday.
Thanks as always to our great friends at Chemist Warehouse. We'll see you next time.